From the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., this is the Tyler's Place podcast, a podcast by Freemasons for Freemasons. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards, 32nd degree Knight Commander of the Court of Honor, KCCH, as we say. You can always email us, podcast@scottishrite.org. We always love to hear from you. And make sure you check out some of our other great offerings. Go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. We would appreciate that. Check out the Scottish Rite Journal podcast. Check out the Master Craftsman College. If you're a Freemason, mastercraftsmancollege.org. There's free learning courses on there and all the original Master Craftsman courses. You should check those out if you're a Mason. Make you a smarter, faster, better Mason, as Art de Hoyos always says. June 2023. It's a very special Masonic anniversary, believe it or not. And in a way, this marks the foundation of Freemasonry as we know it today, thanks to James Anderson's 1723 Constitutions. Now, the original Anderson's Constitutions were published in 1723. It was written by Reverend James Anderson. He was a Presbyterian clergyman and Freemason, of course. And it was written at the request of the third Grand Master of the Premier Grand Lodge of England. Anderson's Constitutions contains a historical narrative of Masonry, and it traces it back to biblical times, through our allegories. It connects to the stonemasons' guilds of medieval Europe. It outlines all the moral teachings, the duties, the obligations of Masons, and what we refer to as the ancient charges or the ancient rules of Masonry. And they emphasize the importance of brotherly love, charity, and self-improvement. Anderson's Constitutions really laid the groundwork for the modern Masonic fraternity and established that standardized system of governance and rituals that most Grand Lodges follow in some form or fashion today. It really is what enables Masons from all walks of life to come together in lodges and do the work of Freemasonry. The Constitutions themselves have actually been compared to the United States Constitution. Parts of the United States Constitution were lifted almost whole cloth from Anderson's Constitution. So it's a really important document for a lot of reasons outside of Freemasonry besides. Now, this year marks the 300th anniversary of Anderson's Constitutions, and the Grand Lodge of England is doing a lot to celebrate that foundational document. One of the things that they're doing is that they have this year's Prestonian Lecturer focusing on the 1723 Constitutions. And you're saying probably, well, what the heck is the Prestonian Lecturer? It is one of the highest honors that can be bestowed upon a Mason. It is a lecture sponsored by the oldest Masonic lodge of research in the entire world, and there's only one selected per year. And joining me on the podcast, I'm deeply honored to have this year's Prestonian Lecturer himself, past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia, Illustrious and Most Worshipful Brother Akram Elias, 33rd degree. Most Worshipful, thank you for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. Humbled to have you here. And I want to start, before I get too far afield and say something that's not quite correct, let's explain what the Prestonian Lecture really is, what it means.
Sure. Well, thank you very much first, Maynard. I truly appreciate it. I'm humbled myself, and it is truly a great honor and a humbling experience to be the Prestonian Lecturer. This is a tradition that goes back to William Preston in the United Grand Lodge of England, who had left money behind to support organizing always once a year a great lecture that advances the teachings and the principles of Freemasonry. And this time, this year happens to be a momentous occasion. We are in 2023. That is the 300s, as we say in America, the tricentennial of the 1723 Constitutions of the Freemasons. Those constitutions came to us as a gift from England. They were the constitutions that helped establish Freemasonry. And so for that special occasion, I was asked if I could submit a paper and be considered as a candidate to be a Prestonian Lecturer for 2023, given the occasion. And I did. And the title of my paper was the 1723 constitutions, the indispensable trowel, cementing America's foundations. So it was to bring to light the incredible impact and legacy of those constitutions on the founding of the United States, as we call it, as George Washington and many of the founding fathers of our country have called it, America the Great Experiment. And I was really humbled when they came back to me and said, your paper has been accepted. You've been selected to be the Prestonian, and then invited me to deliver it on January 31st. So just got back recently from London.
Wow.
At a special communication of the United Grand Lodge of England. It was an extraordinary opportunity and a humbling one.
And that, you have had some incredible experiences in terms of your Masonic career. Being Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of DC, I mean, perhaps no Grand Lodge in the country, it has more, I guess, important history based on the connection to the founding of our American government and, as you said, our American experiment, and so much history just in this area in general. But to then go even further back to the Grand Lodge of England, that really did have to be exciting for you.
Yes, it sure was. And, a 300th anniversary is a very important occasion. It's an opportunity not only to celebrate, but we also need to step back and reflect on how we reposition our fraternity. Likewise, in few years, in 2026, our country, the United States of America, will be celebrating its 250th anniversary. That is a huge milestone. And that should be also a moment not simply for celebration, but also a moment of repositioning. How do we take this great experiment forward? The constitutions of the Freemasons, 1723, I truly believe, and I dare say, if we did not have them, if our founding fathers did not have that gift at their disposal, I dare say that the great experiment might not have been able to sustain itself. Because when you think about it, what was the great experiment? What is it till today? First, we need to remember it's an experiment. In other words, it is in the making. It will always be in the making. It can never be completed.
We're never going to be, we're done. We're good.
We can't do that.
We got it figured out. We're good to go.
Absolutely. We got to keep at it. But the key thing about it is that it's an experiment that keeps moving forward. We cannot turn the clock backward. We got to keep moving forward. And although there are problems, like in every society, there are problems that come from old problems. They recur. They come back. We should always construct new ways to overcome those old problems. So we keep moving forward. So what was the essence of it? I mean, you think about it. Today, we take things for granted, although if we're careful and watch what is happening in our country today, it should really, we should take a pause and reflect. Back then, we're talking about 13 former colonies that had official religions or sanctioned religion. And Protestants, the various sects, denominations of Protestants did not like one another. Yeah.
Oh, and they didn't like the Catholics either, which is...
They did not like the Catholics or the Jews.
Came from.
Absolutely. They didn't like the Jews or the Catholics. And then let's talk about the ethnic and national origins. I mean, honestly, the Scots, the English, and the Irish did not see eye to eye, to say the least. What about the Prussians, the Dutch, the Spanish, the French? Well, those were the populations. And let's not forget there was, slavery and freedom. Women were completely out of the picture. There were natives. This is the reality that the founding fathers of our country were looking at, were dealing with. And they said, can these diverse people, can they learn to govern themselves by themselves under a rule of law that has their consent without needing someone or an entity that rules over them and keep them from destroying one another. This is the experiment. And the constitutions of the Freemasons, as I said, was the gift because it created the sacred space called the lodge. And it instilled some fundamental principles. One, religious tolerance. So as the constitutions would say, it's basically the religion in which we all believe, meaning respecting everyone else's
Congress
faith.
shall make no law.
Congress shall make no law. Second, meritocracy. The constitutions of the Freemasons said you advance, not because of blood lineage or heritage or social status. It's through your hard work.
Who can best work and best agree.
Best work and best agree. And that's meritocracy for America. We don't always live up to it, but that is what we aim for.
That's the idea.
That's the idea. Constantly moving towards meritocracy. And the third very important thing is e pluribus unum, the motto of our country in Latin. Out of many, one. Diversity within unity. These men learned, irrespective of their distinctions, where they came from originally, etc., to work together in the governance of the lodge. And very importantly, the constitutions of the Freemasons also taught and insisted on the importance of education, enlightenment, the pursuit of knowledge in the 7 liberal arts and sciences, so we can expand our minds, we can conquer ignorance, and become more enlightened. You see, the lodge, and that's why Benjamin Franklin printed those constitutions and helped spread them throughout the colonies. So lodges could erupt pretty much all around and prepare those men in each town, in every place, to learn how to do that self-governance. And I really dare say, if it weren't for that experiment that Freemasonry provided, the great experiment of America might not have survived.
I love that idea that the lodge created that sacred space where men could go and learn to basically set their differences aside, which is what a lodge still provides. It provides that space where Catholic, Protestant, Jewish man, Muslim man, man who doesn't have a particular denomination per se, they can all come in and say, we're all good people. We all agree that there's something out there, and we're just going to work together with what we've got here and now and try and make things better here and now. And I think it still provides that. But how do we get back? This is a bigger question. How do we get back from, because I think we've drifted away from the sacred space and we've gotten far enough away from it in that there are arguments and divisions that seem to be widening. So how do we as Freemasons bring people back to that sacred space? Men especially,
Well, this is the key question, and I think this is the opportunity that this important anniversary presents for us to reflect, and in a few years, the Great Experiments anniversary. So here's the deal: it is not really. It is difficult, but we must do it. Success, is not always a good thing. And I think Freemasonry's experiment in the United States contributed so much to the founding of the resiliency, the flexibility, the adaptability of our system of governance, that somehow over time, especially maybe over the last 50, 60 years, Freemasons start forgetting a little bit about that, or maybe more than a little bit. And then we need to basically go back. So it's a renaissance. It is difficult, but it must be done. The lodge is still the lodge. Our rituals, we still have them. Thank God those things have not disappeared. All we need to do is to start educating ourselves and every new Mason. This is very important. We are now in a situation across the United States where we are attracting the new, younger generation. They are thirsty for all kinds of things. Let's make sure we educate the entered apprentice. If we focus on educating a little bit the entered apprentice, by educating meaning explaining to him, this is what the lodge is about. That's how you can advance yourself. And then keep the ways of what is happening outside from coming in and corrupting the lodge. In fact, the lodge is going to help you become a freer person. And these are very practical. These are, I'm not talking about philosophical concepts that are out there. No. Masonry's teachings provide very practical tools with extraordinarily practical applications that help a man become freer, truly free, not be reacting right and left thinking that he's free, but really reflecting before he acts, because that is true freedom. Assuming responsibility, because that comes with freedom. Being tolerant, so learning how to push back in his community, wherever he finds himself, push back against forms of intolerance by educating people, not by scorning them.
Not by meeting intolerance with more intolerance.
No, exactly. But by showing, by providing a good example, and also pointing people to a different way of thinking so they can reflect on that and be a bridge. A mason. Mason is a builder. In other words, you need to be a builder of bridges in your community and help bring people together. It can be done. It has to be done. And I can tell you something very important. The Scottish Rite degrees are extraordinarily well structured. And I'm talking for the southern jurisdiction of the United States. Those degrees are extraordinarily powerful to help the Master Mason decipher and better understand the hidden symbolism of the 3 degrees. See, we define Masonry as a system, a peculiar system of morality, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. So if we don't teach the new Mason how to go about on his own, that's his own path towards his own freedom and toward becoming himself a builder of a better community. Okay, better family, better whatever. But if we don't teach him the means, how to go about the deciphering, not to tell him how to think, but to teach him how to use the tools so he can improve himself, we're missing the point.
Well, and I think too, and this is I guess this is an opinion question, but I am of the opinion that, and I've been a master of a lodge. I've had to memorize lengthy lectures and ritual. I'm not whining about doing it. I think it's important. But we get so focused on memorizing word for word, we forget to pay attention to what the words mean. And we have brothers who have taken these lengthy obligations, whether we're talking the first 3 degrees of Masonry or the various York Rite degrees or the Scottish Rite degrees, these obligations that you promise you will uphold yourself to this particular standard. And they memorize it and they stand before the lodge and they recite it. And yet they go out into the world and they don't practice it. And as you said, we've got to educate the entered apprentice. No one sits. How often are we sitting down the entered apprentice and saying, "Do you see the rough ashlar and the perfect ashlar? Do you see the common gavel? It's not a sledgehammer. You're not breaking it apart in one fell swoop. You chip away, little improvements." Right. No one sits that man down and says that. How do we get worshipful masters? How do we get grand lodges? How do we get blue lodges? How do we get catechism instructors to take that leap from memorize this because we said so to put this into practice in your heart?
Well, we just have to really live the ritual, period. We tell every entered apprentice, we ask him, what came you here to do? And he says, to learn, to subdue my passions. That's very important because as humans, the passions, I feel, you feel like you want to react, what is this guy insulting me? What is happening here? You've got to control passions. People are different. I don't know my brother as he is acting one way or another. I have no idea what state of mind he's in. I don't understand what is happening right there. So instead of me reacting and judging, I need to learn silence, which is what the entered apprentice degree teaches us. Secrecy. It means the virtue of silence. His tongue is your enemy. Shut up.
Listen first.
Listen first. Then ask. Inquire. Don't judge. And so we say that's important, controlling your passions. But for the purpose of what? To improve myself in Masonry. not to improve myself in mathematics or how to speak in masonry. Therefore, if as lodges and grand lodges do not spend the time and encourage every master to spend some quality time with the entered apprentice to help him understand that what is that veiled allegory? What is this? And how does he use it? We tell him in the entered apprentice degree, you have a trestle board. These are tools. We tell him everything in the first degree. I mean, the whole ecosystem of Freemasonry is really described in the various lectures within the entered apprentice degree. So when you tell him, this is your trestle board, not mine. And these are the tools you heard about and you witnessed in your initiation. Now, like you said, this is the rough ashlar, that's you. That's the smooth ashlar, that's you. Now, here's your trestle board and here's the tools. How do you use these to move gradually, keep moving from this state to that state? So the memorization has its virtue, has
Absolutely.
its benefit.
The hope is you osmotize that.
So exactly. But if we simply tell people memorize, but we do not spend the time to help them dissect, so it's called dissecting. So you walk them through and you sit down and have conversations. So why do you think why were you blindfolded, by the way? What is it? What is the meaning, deeper meaning? That means no matter what you think you know, no matter how many degrees you have outside, you're coming in now, humbling yourself. You're now blinded and you're going to see a new light. Masonry is going to tell you there's a different way of seeing everything in the world. All those degrees, all that experience, you're going to be able now to start seeing it in a magnified way, in a different way that's going to help you become stronger, freer, and a true builder. That is incredible. What a competitive advantage a person would have, armed with something like it's very practical.
It is.
And so we cannot deny we're making somebody a promise. We're not fulfilling the promise. That's all it takes. My word is my bond. We made a promise to that entered apprentice. We've got to deliver.
Well, and I don't think, and your way of looking at it is so refreshing, and because I don't think, and I completely agree, and I wouldn't have been able to articulate it the way you did, but I had very similar thoughts because it is practical, and I don't think brothers look at it that way necessarily. Like you see the line of officers in the lodge, and ideally you would move from one chair to the other and ascend from perhaps the Tyler's chair to the east. But there is real genius in that. As the Tyler, you're outside the door, but you see every single person that passes through that door. And so you get to meet every individual that's a member of your lodge. And then you become perhaps the junior deacon or a steward. And now you're traveling inside the lodge, but you don't have much to say. You're going around, you're handling very basic tasks. And then with each step, there's a little more added on until you finally get to the east. And now you've got all these lessons that went before you. You've learned everyone's name at the front door. You've learned all that ritual. You've learned how to handle the finances, perhaps. You've delivered so much of that you're in a seat of great comfort because you have ingrained that institutional knowledge, not only of the rules and regulations and bylaws, but of the individuals that work with you. And it is a very practical art. And we get so wrapped up in worrying about checking the right boxes and making sure we say this instead of that, or the instead of and in a particular bit of ritual, we don't stop to consider the practical element.
Absolutely. And let me add to what you just said, because this is really very, very, very powerful. We say our institution is really supported by 3 columns or 3 pillars, denoted beauty, strength, and wisdom. And the lodge has 3 officers. The junior warden sits in the south, standing for beauty, and has a tool. And the tool is the plum. And the plum teaches rectitude. So this is what the governance of the lodge is teaching me how to govern my life. The senior warden is in the west. Strength, the tool is the level. So it's teaching me there is a connection between strength and leveling things, strength and the level. Connection between beauty and rectitude, and then the square and wisdom in the East, which means simply, if I learn, and this is discipline, but that's how people improve. That's leadership. If I learn before I say anything, before I act, if I check myself and ask, is what I am about to do, is it creating ugliness or beauty towards my brother in the lodge, in my family, in the workplace, in my community? So if it is ugliness, that's not good. It's got to be beauty. And beauty is telling me rectitude. So do what is right. Stand for what is right. Because being an upright person is important. Standing for what is right. And that is essential. Then I got to add to it. It's not enough. It's not the only one. The other one is, okay, am I strengthening or weakening? That's the level. Strength. Am I strengthening? Is my action going to strengthen the lodge? Strengthen my relationship with my brothers? Strengthen my family connections with my friends? Or is it weakening? And level meaning, am I leveling now with them? Because if it is not level, it is weak and it will collapse. And the last one is the wisdom, the square, which brings the level and the plumb together. So you ask yourself, Akram, okay, you need to do what is right, but you need to do also what is fair because you're acting towards others. How do you reconcile the two? That's wisdom. So control your passions before you act and check yourself. These are practical lessons and tools for true leadership that give you, that will give the Mason an incredible competitive advantage in society, because people will look at that person, wow, make good judgment. Let me ask his advice. People would come to you. You gain respect. You gain social status, influence in your community, because you're someone who knows how to stay silent and not gossip about others, because gossip destroys all kinds of relationships. And the entered apprentice degree teaches you secrecy, meaning the virtue of silence. Your tongue is your enemy. Silence it. And then act that way. For God's sake, we just talked a little bit about the entered apprentice degree. That's it. And I did not reveal any secrets here. These are the things that are out there. But it's amazing. That's all we need to do. But we must do it because America needs Freemasons today more than ever.
Amen.
And enlightened Freemasons, and the world needs also Freemasons, enlightened Freemasons around the world. And America, if America is unable to sustain the experiment, is unable to keep projecting, we don't rule. Our country does not rule over anyone else. We project the same way Masonry tells us, diffuse the light. Diffuse the light of freedom, democratic governance, and openness. If America loses that, the world will suffer.
But I think we need to go one step further. We don't just need Freemasons. We don't need guys that show up to the lodge and sit on the sideline and pay their dues and have a hot dog and they vote on the bills and then they go home. We need men who, yes, show up to the lodge and help run that, but also are out in the world living those values and displaying those.
Absolutely.
I say to brothers all the time, listen, nothing magic happens here in the lodge. We're paying the bills. Masonry is what we do when we're out in the world. And that is what we need to hear. This is a classroom, and that's it.
You said it. This is the classroom. And that is why we need to, in every Masonic meeting, in every lodge, we need to devote some quality time. Time is very precious to all of us. We need to spend quality time helping the Mason figure out how to use those tools, because that is a safe space where they can experiment and talk it and have conversations. Let's facilitate, conversations so we can learn from one another. That's the sacred band. So we can apply outside with more confidence. Each one can go and apply with more confidence. But if we If we deny that classroom, quote unquote, if we take that away, what are we doing? We're failing our mission. So, and again, it is not that difficult. It is difficult because it requires discipline. But since when? Success, comes without anything, without hard work and discipline.
I got to tell you, it is exciting to hear someone say these kinds of things, because I think there are things that sort of loom in the back of a lot of folks' minds and don't have the gift to articulate the way that you do. I do have to ask you a few questions about Akram Elias, because I got you here.
Okay.
So I'm gonna take some liberties, and he can fuss at me later. He likes to talk masonry. He doesn't talk Akram Elias very often, but I've got him, so I'm going to make it happen.
All right.
What brought you to the lodge room door? What made you go in? I mean, obviously, a very well-spoken brother. You could have done just about anything with your life, I would imagine. You're well-educated. What made you go and knock?
It's a great question. Two things. One, I was when I was a teenager, I've always been interested in history. So by studying history, the Middle Ages was a fascinating period for me. This is where I learned about different groups and secret societies, quote unquote. They led me intellectually, out of curiosity, to Freemasonry. So I started reading a lot about that. But really, I was very busy working. I didn't think about knocking at the door. But these are the two things that happen now. One thing is that, I decided to become an American. I was born in Lebanon. I'm finishing my book, hopefully this year, titled American by Choice. By choice meaning not of birth. I knocked at the door and requested to become a citizen of the United States. But pledging allegiance to the flag of a country, for me, was a very serious endeavor. So I needed to learn more about America. So my delving, and I've toured 48 of the 50 states, still have 2 to go. And when I say toured, I don't mean going to hotels and conferences. I really mean going in people's homes, jeeping, doing all kinds of things just to get to learn about this whole great experiment. So intellectually, I really delved into this. And as I was looking at that, Masonry kept popping up. I mean, George Washington said, we're engaged in the last great experiment for promoting human happiness. And I'm saying, my God, what is this all about? And who are these guys? So one thing led to another, and then so my interest now in really knocking at the door increased exponentially. And then I had the fortune to befriend someone who passed away a long time ago. And in a conversation, we were talking about America. And conversation came to Freemasonry. He was a member of Potomac Lodge number 5. And he said, Akram, if you're interested, I'll be more than happy and honored to sign your petition. But I need to tell you something. I said, what? He said, you may be disappointed. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, you may not find the focus on that kind of education that you found through your own research, but I'm happy to do that for you. And he did. And I was so, and I'll be forever eternally grateful to Steve for having brought me into Potomac Lodge. That lodge, of course, one of the founding lodges, of the Grand Lodge of Washington, D.C. But the brethren there were so focused on doing the degree work so nicely. I literally, Maynard, I'm not kidding you, I literally felt something go up and down my spine on my initiation night. I was like very moved. There's something happening. And then my curiosity, of course, pushed me. And I was so fortunate to have had our late brother, Right Worshipful, Dean Clatterbuck, who was a pillar of Potomac Lodge, who became a mentor of mine. And then I picked up a couple of more along the way. You always pick up mentors.
If you're smart, you do.
Absolutely. In fact, that's what the entered apprentice degree also teaches, Go to those, if you have questions, ask and emulate. That's why we say emulation in Masonry. So I was very fortunate. So Masonry helped me deepen my understanding, first and foremost, of America, the Great Experiment. So it made me a better citizen. That's how I look at it. Second, it really made me a much better person and a stronger one. And I have greater understanding of what relief means. Relief is not simply to provide relief and assistance to the needy. That's essential. But how do I relieve myself of those things that keep me chained? How do I emancipate myself? How do I conquer my ignorance? How do I conquer my prejudice? How do I conquer anything?
Isn't that what we're all trying when we say we're keep our passions in due bounds?
Absolutely.
It's due bounds, but that's to free yourself from those parts of you that cause you harm.
Absolutely. So, and that is why the gift, I call Masonry is a gift. It's a gift for me that is immeasurable. I cannot quantify it. So I have to give back. People ask me, what drives you? Why do you give? I said, nothing. It's freedom. I owe back. I owe back my country. I owe back Freemasonry. I don't need anything from anybody because I got all the gold from the teachings. And in the process, I made some good friends also. But I have to give back in any way, shape, or form. And I think this is the most incredible secret of Freemasonry. And I understood the difference between an obligation and a duty. We often use both words interchangeably. But Masonry helped me understand there is a deeper meaning to obligation. It has to do with freedom. Because I kept asking myself, why am I asked, is it of your own free will and accord before you take an obligation? What is this? I mean, duty is something that we don't necessarily choose. We all have duties in our lives, family duties, duty to country, at work. And in the lodge, if you're elected an officer, you have duties. And duties, other people expect something of you. Okay? You're accountable in a way to them.
For you do. And that's, you mentioned the Scottish Rite. That's the first lesson of the fourth degree is duty is inescapable. It's inflexible as fate, I believe the quote is. And it's so important to recognize what role duty plays for all of us. But I like this idea that obligation is more.
The obligation is when it's freely taken. So so me, I feel it is my obligation, not a duty, obligation to constantly give back to Freemasonry. I always find the time and energy. Because every now and then, all of us as humans, duty, like you said, and it says, I wish I did not have now to do this with my mom, my brother, my sister, my whatever it is, I wish I didn't have to do that. I wish I didn't have to go to work today or do this or that, but you have to. With an obligation, it's amazing. That feeling doesn't even come in. There's a sense of freedom in it. And the Mason, if he really puts himself into it, ultimately, if he can change any duty and every duty into an obligation, then he won't feel any of that negativity.
It's the old saying, if you do something you love for a living, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's a similar idea. Yeah. So my son just turned 18 and he petitioned and we will initiate him in a few weeks. And I've had like you, I'm so blessed because I've had just a wonderful experience in Freemasonry and I can point to a dozen different things that's the highlight. But I know when he gets initiated, it's looking at all the things that you have done. Do you have something that you were like, I still can't believe that happened or that just fills your heart up? What is there one thing that that really brings you joy to think about? I mean, the Prestonian Lecturer has got to be huge, but
no
but I suspect it's something more personal than that.
Oh my gosh,
See, I got him. That's a good. Whenever you're interviewing somebody and they have to think about it, that's a good one.
I tell you what keeps recharging my batteries, for the lack of a better word. Every time I have the opportunity to speak to a Masonic audience around the country, and when I see a bunch of young guys come at the end, and I hear someone say, "Just want you to know that I became a Freemason because I saw you on the History Channel or on the Discovery Channel or whatever, and you sparked something." That's huge. I'm telling you this, I'm getting goosebumps right now because I feel great. I mean, here's my way of, again, giving back. I think this is incredible. It's very humbling, and it helps me double and triple my energy. Of course, there are things in the past when I was coronated, given the 33rd degree honorary. It was an extraordinary ceremony, and it was in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, wow. You went to the sea of the Scottish Rite, so to speak.
It was an incredible ceremony. It was in 2001. 2001, 9/11 was a most a changing moment, not only in the history of our country, but the world. And when I realized that dark forces are not simply an intellectual thing, they're real. And if people are not equipped with what it takes to smartly conquer darkness with light, not with more darkness. You never conquer darkness with more darkness.
It's like you said about tyranny. You don't conquer tyranny with more tyranny.
No. So that it opened. It just happened. It opened my mind in ways. I would relate it back to my initiation, and it gave me a new boost, and it told me there is much more to be done. Much more to be done. I can recount all kinds of, things. At one point, I can tell you honestly, in the early years, I almost dropped out of Freemasonry.
So that was going to be my next question. We talked about the high. What was the low?
I almost dropped out until I ran into another Mason who became also a mentor, also passed away. The top 3 mentors I had that I met through Masonry all passed away. So this person was named Andre Castellut. Andre is the one who told me, no, there is much more. Don't worry. Don't give up. Why don't you come and join us? There are a few of us who are going to one of the lodges that is about to surrender its charter. Benjamin B. French Lodge, number 15. Do you want to join us? Because this is what we're going to focus on, education. Getting back to the essence of Freemasonry. I said, oh my God, what a privilege. I said, yeah, absolutely. And that's why I ended up going through the line, in fact, and becoming the Worshipful Master of Benjamin B. French Lodge, number 15, in 2001. Seeing how these things are like amazing. So he was my mentor and savior because so Dean Clarerbach taught me about the whole concept about integrity and importance in Masonry, that system of morality. So it kept me going, but I needed the enlightenment, the education, and it was Andre. And the third mentor was also passed away during COVID. Jack London. Jack was the chairman of CACI, one of the most successful, government contractors in the area of national security. He was a member of Cincinnatus Lodge, number 76. And he was my mentor on character and leadership. I mean, he lived it, and he did it applied it, in his world. He was a Navy graduate. So when he passed away during COVID, and we had spoken before, and he knew like something was going to happen. He didn't tell me about it, but he requested to have a Masonic funeral service, special, before his Christian, a religious one. Of course, the Naval Academy did an extraordinary one for him too. So I said, I don't care, COVID or not, I owe him so much. And we did it. In spite of COVID, we've created a special thing, and it was at the George Washington Masonic Memorial.
Oh, wow.
And I was very, very, very pleased to have the Grand Commander of the Supreme Council play a part in that. So that's what I'm talking about, this obligation thing. It's like, it doesn't matter. You shake, you move earth and heaven. Because that gift is what disinterested friendship can afford. That's, again, we learned that in Masonry. So I can go on and on. I just
sure.
You never make it on your own. Masonry taught me you have to have the will. You have to have the discipline. You have to do the hard work. But then you always identify those who will help you along the way.
Team, you gotta. It's a team sport. It's a team sport.
It's a team sport, and that's the sacred band.
Well, my brother, I can't thank you enough for sharing so much of yourself with all of us, but especially with me today. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about your travels. When I know you've got some lectures to give, and that's going to be what the Prestonian Lecture is about. You're going to travel around and give this extraordinary lecture. So if you see this on a calendar, on a Masonic, on a Grand Lodge site somewhere, please make sure you go and get tickets. I assure you will not be disappointed. So beyond the Prestonian Lecture and all these, you've been a Grand Master. What's next for Brother Akram Elias? You ever just going to be like, you know what? I'm going to go sit on the beach somewhere and chill for a little while, or you just not in your nature?
No. Once I became Grand Master, well, I decided that before then. It took a lot of my thinking. Why would I even want to work for 11, 12 years to become one day, that's how it is in Washington. And the only reason was to help me along the way, not only better myself, but connect with all the lodges, try to see how in each year in my journey, work with whoever is the sitting Grand Master and see if we can add a stone in the temple of Freemasonry in Washington, D.C. So to me, the culmination was being Grand Master. I said, I'm not going to accept any position in anything. I'm not going to go in it. My mission now is God gave me a gift, Freemasonry, help me discover the gift and better myself. I need to help spread the light.
That is past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia and the 2023 Prestonian Lecturer, Illustrious and Most Worshipful past Grand Master Akram Elias, 33rd degree. What an honor to have him on, and what an inspiring discussion regarding the 1723 Constitutions and our role as Freemasons. If you want to learn more about it, the details and the links can be found in the description of this podcast, not only about the 1723 Constitutions and the celebrations going on with the Grand Lodge of England, but also more information about the Prestonian Lectures. So check those out. They're going to be found in the links to the description of this podcast. Email us anytime, podcast@scottishrite.org. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Tyler's Place podcast from the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction. I'm Maynard Edwards, 32nd degree KCCH. Catch you next time right here on the Tyler's Place.